record all my sessions, and I will send you a copy of the recording. What you're looking
Okay.
at right now is anything, any kind of material that you would like to send a picture of to my email, send it to that email.
Okay.
Okay. Will, let me just ask you where you heard about me. Through a counselor at TJ, or
My aunt actually.
was your aunt ex?
Well, she has kids of her own, and like she hasn't used you, but she's heard about you.
Oh,
So
okay. Okay. Well, it's always nice to get referred by friends of people.
yeah,
Okay. The problems that you would like to cover today, are they such that you could verbalize them?
yeah.
In other words, okay. In other words, this
That's
problem here could be verbalized. If it's a graph, then it's a lot tougher to verbalize.
for sure. But
So,
no, most of them are just equations.
okay. Let's go ahead and start with one, and we'll work through it, and you can see how this works.
All right. So the first one is f of x equals sine squared x plus cosine squared x over cosecant x. And yeah,
And the goal is to simplify it, right?
yeah.
Okay. Well, you're more into trig than I thought. I usually when you're taking pre-calc and trig, they'll split it up one each semester. But you're into trig pretty good, which is fine. I love trig. What is sine squared plus cosine squared equal to?
I thought it was tangent.
It's equal to 1.
One.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Which means that that is 1 over cosecant of x.
Oh.
What's that equal to?
Um.
It's the reciprocal of cosecant.
Oh, so it'd be cosecant x over 1?
Nope. This is sine x.
Oh,
Let's go through some of our trig identities. You're not going to be able to do these problems until you've got these memorized.
okay.
Okay? There's a couple of tips I can offer for memorizing them. The
Okay.
6 most important ones are the reciprocal identities, which means you got sine, cosine, and tangent are your 3 primary functions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, we know what the reciprocal of tangent is.
Cotangent?
Cotangent. That's a piece of cake.
Yeah.
So we've got cosecant and secant
Mm-hmm.
left. Well, the way to memorize them is the cosecant goes with the sine because the first letters are different. And the secant goes with the cosine because the first letters are different.
Oh,
In other words, if cosine went with cosecant, the first letters would be the same. And sine would go with secant, and the first letters would be the same. But they're not. So these are the only 2 that you can get mixed up on. And just
okay.
remember that their first letters are different. Now,
Okay.
that's only 3 of them, and there are actually 6, but the other 6 are a piece of cake. If sine is 1 over cosecant, then cosecant is 1 over sine by definition. In other words, reciprocals are like that, which makes this 1 over cosine, which
So
makes
they're just like,
cotangent 1 over tangent.
okay.
So it boils down to memorizing these 6 things, but in reality, you only have to kind of memorize those 2. Everything else you're going to figure out. You understand why I'm saying that?
Because, yeah, they're, if
Yeah, as
one,
long as you know that cotangent goes with tangent, then you just have to figure out does cosecant go with sine or does it go with cosine? And which one does secant go with?
Okay.
Okay. So those are called the six reciprocal.
Oh, I think I was getting that confused with the 6 trig ratios.
Well, let's go on because there are 5 more that are really important.
Okay.
There's 2 quotient ones. And the quotient ones are tangent equals sine over cosine. I'm going to leave off the x. Just it's implied. It's actually tangent of x equals sine x over cosine x. So what does that mean? That's the one you have to memorize. But it also tells you what is cotangent equal to.
It is.
Remember, cotangent is the reciprocal of tangent.
So it's 1 over tangent?
No, reciprocate that.
1 over.
You're right, it is 1 over tangent. But what would 1 over tangent be? It would be cosine over sine.
Oh.
In other words, if cotangent is the reciprocal of tangent, then this answer has to be the reciprocal of that answer.
Okay.
So you don't really have to memorize cotangent. All you have to do is know that cotangent is the reciprocal of tangent and memorize tangent. Now let's talk about the 3 trigonometric identities. And those are the 11 that you have to remember. You got to remember 6 reciprocal, 2 quotients, and 3 trig. Or actually, they're 3 Pythagorean identities. And the first one we talked about already. Sine squared plus cosine squared is what?
1.
You got that one memorized. Here's another one. You got to memorize this, and I don't know of any other way to do it other than say memorize it. There's no trick on this one. Tangent squared plus 1 equals secant squared.
Okay.
And then there's a third one. There's a third one involving cotangent. Well, cotangent squared plus 1 equals, put a co in front of secant squared and you get cosecant squared.
Oh.
So those are your 3 Pythagorean identities. Now let's look at all 11 of them. Oops. Starting right there. We got 6 reciprocals. Okay? And you really cannot go any further in trig without memorizing all 11 of these. It's going to be absolutely vital.
Okay.
So just put your mind to memorizing them. You're going to have to do it. Okay? Those 6, once again, the only 2 that might present you with difficulties are the sine and the cosine. Tangent certainly is not going to. And once you figure out sine, cosine, and tangent, then these 3 become automatic. They're just the reciprocal.
Oh. Okay.
You see that? You see where those 2, in other words, if sine is 1 over cosecant, then cosecant is 1 over sine if you just do the algebra.
Okay.
Okay, same thing with those 2. Same thing with those 2. So the ones on the right, you don't have to memorize. You just have to know the ones on the left.
And then that gives you the.
That's why I say that even though there's 11 things you have to memorize, they really are not. There's 2 on this page. There is 1 quotient that you have to memorize, which is the tangent, at which point you can figure out what the cotangent is. And there are two Pythagorean identities. There's the first one and the second one. But the third one you can figure out from the second one. Let's talk about something for a moment, what cofunction means. So far we haven't really talked about cofunctions, although I've asked you to use it to memorize stuff. But what's the cofunction of sine?
Would it be cosecant?
Just stick a co in front of the words.
Cosine. Okay.
What's the cofunction of tangent?
Cotangent?
And what's the cofunction of secant?
Cosecant.
Now notice these are not the reciprocals. These are just cofunctions. Cofunctions also have a property in trig that we won't get into at the moment. For the moment, you just need to know what the word cofunction means. And if I said, what's the cofunction of cosine, then that means it's sine. It's take away the co. So these things are cofunctions. Okay?
Okay.
Now, when I said this third trig identity was easy to remember, it's because it's the cofunction of both. In other words, cotangent is the cofunction of tangent, and cosecant is the cofunction of secant. So if you think of the third trig identity as just being the cofunctions of the second, you got it.
Oh.
Okay? And that principle actually goes all the way into calculus, this principle of cofunctions. So it's worth knowing about cofunctions at this point. All right, so those are our 11 trig identities that you just really have to memorize, and you can't get by without them.
Okay.
Go ahead and give me another problem. The simple.
Tangent x over secant x.
Now let me get a little writing room here. Tangent x over secant x. Okay?
And that's a, well, it's f of x equals tangent x.
Yeah, that's fine. I knew that's, even if it wasn't an equation, that's an expression that we can simplify.
Yeah.
Well, there's nothing in common with cotangent and secant. So I'm not going to turn tangent into cotangent. I could. In other words, that would be 1 over cotangent times secant. True statement. But it doesn't help us simplify it.
No.
A better way is to turn everything into sines and cosines. Tangent is what in terms of sine and cosine? Remember that first quotient identity?
It is the inverse of cotangent.
No, that's the reciprocal identity. We're looking for the identity that matches tangent with sine and cosine.
Tan x equals sine x over cosine x.
There you go. That's tangent. And then we're putting that whole thing over secant. Well, if I look at the reciprocal of secant, what is it?
The reciprocal of secant is cosine?
Cosine. So I'm going to replace that with 1 over cosine. You with me?
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm dividing a fraction by another fraction, which means I'm going to flip and multiply. So I'm really going to multiply by cosine of x over 1. And now the cosines cancel, and I'm left with sine x.
Oh.
That's what that comes down to.
Okay.
And it wasn't that obvious, but you can tell that you're not going to be able to do these unless you have a really, really good understanding of those 11 things that I said you needed to memorize.
Yeah.
You've got to know the quotient ones, you got to know the reciprocal ones. And if you're looking at anything squared, you got to know the trig ones. But the simple ones are the quotient ones and the reciprocal ones. You have another
Yeah.
one?
F of x equals cosine x times cotangent x.
Okay. Now, remember what the quotient identity is for that. What is it?
For cosine, or I know the one for cotangent. It's cosine over sine.
Correct. Which makes this cosine x times cosine x over sine x, which is cosine squared of x over sine x.
And is that a identity?
No, but I don't see anything else you can really do with it. You could turn that into 1 minus sine squared x, but you sure this was the problem? It was cosine times cotangent?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Because it would make more sense if it was cosine divided by cotangent. Then my cosines would have canceled and I'd have been left with sine only. As it is, that doesn't appear to be greatly simplified from what we started with. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure what they're trying to do to you here. But the key on all of these is to try to convert one trig function into a form of the other one. Well,
Okay.
I can convert cotangent into tangent, making it 1 over tangent, but I can also convert it into cosine over sine. And which one you use doesn't really matter. You're still going to end up in the same spot. You can still end up cosine squared over sine.
Yeah.
In other words, if I change this cotangent into 1 over tangent, then here's what I have. I have cosine x over tangent of x. Okay? Now, that becomes cosine down here on the right, cosine x over, and tangent is sine over cosine. Flip and multiply, and I get cosine squared over sine, which I cannot reduce any. So it's hard for me to imagine that they gave you this problem knowing that you couldn't simplify it any further than that. I'm not even sure that counts as a simplification. If you were trying to verify trig identities, then yes, I can see where they might put one on the left side and the other on the right. Have you gotten to verify trig identities yet?
We have.
Okay. So here's the way this might have looked. This is undoubtedly what the problem was intended to say. Prove that that equals this. When you are verifying trig identities, is all you're trying to do is prove that one side equals the other.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, all I have to do is show that cotangent is cosine over sine. So the next step is cosine over sine. And now multiply the two together and you get cosine squared of x over sine of x. That's the same thing as that. They are verified.
Okay.
So this makes sense in the context of a verification problem. Doesn't make a lot of sense if they give you just this and say come up with what that's equal to, because I
Yeah.
could come up with 100 different answers. There's not only one answer. It's not just cosine squared over sine. I could put it in terms of cotangent, tangents, secants, cosecants, anything I wanted to. But if it's a verify problem, then they're telling you what they want you to put it into. They're giving you the right side. So you have to turn the left side into the right side.
Okay.
Okay? And that's the way those usually work. Now, Will, I have a 4 o'clock that I've got to go to, so I'm going to have to cut you off right here.
Okay.
That is should give you a taste of my math style. If you want to schedule another appointment, go to this website, and I have online scheduling.
Okay.
So you can do it independent of talking to me. It'll show you my availability and let you schedule either half hour or hour sessions. But that's my website, and it'll give you a little more information about me if you need it, and also let you schedule sessions directly. And then I just get a text saying, Will O has scheduled a session.
Thank you.
Okay? All right, Will. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.